We are here, Halloween episode, Halloween 2019.
Yes.
Big Spooktacular 58, episode 58. One of our most popular guests on the podcast, Adrian Lee.
One of the most. That's disappointing.
The most popular guest on the podcast, Adrian Lee.
You're good to me. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, Adrian. It's always good to have you. I feel like every time you come on, we end up going way over an hour talking about stuff because we go down rabbit holes. And
Yeah, I didn't plan for that tonight.
Adrian brings us down a rabbit hole here, and then we're talking about UFOs, and then we're talking about ghosts, and then we're talking about how you connect the two.
I really like that, though, because unlike other radio shows, they ask very narrow questions like, what was your scariest experience? Have you, what was the most impressive ghost? I like the fact that we cover everything from UFOs, collective consciousness, Bigfoot. I mean, I quite like having questions thrown at me from different places.
Yeah.
And one day I might not have an answer. I'll have to put my hand up and say I'm going to have to do some research.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't do it again last week. I forgot to mention Damon Weinandt, co-host of the podcast, and Colin, co-host of the podcast. Sometimes I forget to mention.
And what episode is this?
This is episode 58.
58.
So come back week after week, and the boys are here continuing to put out episodes. So it's great to have you guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
So let's just jump right into it. This is the big Halloween episode. So, in Natural, we got to talk about Halloween related stuff, which isn't hard for you, Adrian, because that's kind of the whole basis of your job, right? Is
I'm the
haunted
busiest
kind of stuff, the busiest.
Yes, Halloween's a very popular time for me. Everyone wants a paranormal investigator. Come November, I'll be like Santa Claus after Christmas. No one will want me. I'll be sat in a dark room waiting for the phone to ring. No friends. But yes, I've done about 2,000 miles this month.
Wow.
Expos, events, book signings, talks, all kinds of
We tried to get you last week. You were in Wisconsin, right?
Yeah.
Doing a thing for your new book.
That's right, yeah, book signings. In fact, today's the only day I could have actually done this in October, so I'm glad you could squeeze me in. It was this or nothing, unfortunately. But
this man came from interviews today doing live psychic readings on air.
I was
going
to say,
That's right.
How does that work? How can you do it over the air, like just hearing someone's voice? How can you give them readings?
I'm accessing their spirits, and of course, spirits don't have a sense of geography. They have no physical body. So the person I could be talking to in Britain, to be honest, if I'm on the phone with them, and so the spirit comes through to me to give me the information I need. I don't need to be in the room with the person. In actuality, it's really nice because a lot of people are skeptical and think, oh, you're not a psychic, you're cold reading, you're asking certain questions, you're looking at the person, you're reading their body language. If someone calls in from another part of the country, I have no idea who they are.
True.
I can't see them. Yeah. And then, for 20 minutes, I knock it out the park with all the details about their grandmother, and they're crying. Yeah. And that's quite an impressive way of dealing with psychics that are skeptical, people that are skeptical.
Wow.
It's very difficult to argue with that.
Yeah.
I mean, they would then say, oh, you knew who was going to call in and you did research. I mean, they always move the goalpost, but I had no clue when I walked into that studio this morning. I mean, I can't deny that it's not a difficult process that, you go live on the radio to do psychic readings. I mean, that takes...
it's got to be a little draining.
Like,
is it more so draining than doing live, like face-to-face ones?
I tell you what was draining, the fact that I had to get up at 5 o'clock because it started at 7:30 was draining.
That would be,
But people that early want to get their readings done. That's crazy to me.
That's right. It was a breakfast show, a phone-in breakfast show, and that's when the most people were listening. I wouldn't say it was draining in terms of mentally draining. It's more draining in terms of the fact that, I'll give you an example. I was in Chanhassen this weekend, and I probably did 17 to 18 readings over 2.5 days. And the thing that causes me issue, and you might get a sense of it even now, is I lose my voice. You're talking non-stop for 2.5 days, and we're having a conversation. It's stimulus and response. We're going backwards and forwards. If I'm doing a psychic reading, you're just sat there for an hour, and I'm telling you things pretty much. Yeah. So it reminds me of being a school teacher where you just talk without much coming back, I guess.
That makes sense.
So it's not draining. I can't sit here and... There's worse things to do for a job. I've done them.
Oh, yeah.
I've been a school teacher. I know there's worse things to do for a job.
True. Well, and you said
you hope the kids sit there and listen and not talk.
That's right.
Well, you said there was people that were getting mad at you for doing this. When you said some people were upset. I mean, which should come from anything, but what were they specifically getting mad about?
They're unhappy. There's always right-wing kind of fundamentalist Christians that believe you shouldn't be talking to the dead, you shouldn't be involved with ghosts, you shouldn't be doing psychic work, and they take that from a very right-wing Christian perspective. So the radio station did have a couple of emails, and almost on a daily basis I receive I wouldn't say hate mail, that's a little too harsh, but people that are critical. Even in town here, there's been editorials written in the local paper that even though they don't mention me, sort of insinuate that's what I'm doing. But of course, as you know from working with me in the past, I'm a Christian minister. I've written books on how to be Christian. We've discussed in the past that the good book contains nothing but prophecies, healings, dreams, visions, ghosts from front to back, really. So ultimately, I don't, I'm healing people. I'm actually helping the grieving process. The people that I connected to loved ones that have passed today, were crying, and it gives them a sense of closure. So when the day comes that I'm judged, if God's unhappy with me, then I'll obviously have the wrath of God. But at the moment, I believe genuinely that if you're helping people and you're helping the grieving process and you're trying to give healing, I can't believe that's misplaced from a Christian perspective.
No, and that's we were touching on that in our last podcast.
We did, we did.
Like we said, open-minded and open-ended questions. Like we can go anywhere and talk about anything, and you're giving people the tools or the hope or the faith even to want to believe, or if they don't believe, give them the tools to work with it so they can believe.
I've been to churches where there's a prophet that's arrived to give a talk, and I don't know whether they're a self-proclaimed prophet or people have called them that. But they stand up and they say there's a woman at the back on the left-hand side and she's suffering with a kidney disorder, and the woman stands up and everyone looks around and they give her prayers and healing, and I'm thinking that's what I do. I'm just not standing up at the front of the church and doing it. I'm rolling up my sleeves and getting stuck in. People have said to me in the past, you need to go to church 2 or 3 times and you need to make sure, you're praying in church and everything else. And I would return that and say, well, my relationship with God is just between me and God, but would God rather have me roll up my sleeves, get stuck in and heal people, or does it want me in church 3 times a week singing? What would you think he would prefer? I'm getting stuck in and actually doing it rather than singing about it, I would suggest.
Yeah, and I get, and anything, no matter what you do, any of us do, there's always people that are going to criticize it. You can never make everyone happy.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to quote one of your presidents. You can't please all of the people all of the time. All you can do is the best that you can do. When I write my books, that is the best that I can write at that moment in time. It can't be done any better. I've included everything I wanted to include. They're the best written books I can do at that moment. If people then write a review on Amazon and say they don't like it, at that point, it doesn't matter to me because there was no plan B. I couldn't have written it any better. That's all I've got at that moment in time.
Well, and you could put the most effort in, and there's still going to be people that just are haters.
And usually it's like an internal thing in themselves, and they're projecting it on, they're taking the angle. Well,
what's your book look like? What's your radio show look like? Do you see what I mean? And ultimately, they're not standing with you, when you're being judged. But, I mean, the UFOs and Ghost book, for example, took 8 years to write. These are huge undertakings.
Now, that must have just came out, Adrian, the Ghosts and UFOs.
Yeah, and I was going to get to that, but I have one more thing, Adrian. Sure. I saw a news article, and it was pretty big news. I saw you helped out, or you were part of something with Dancing with the Stars. There was a ghost from the lady. This was in the UK, right? That I was talking about. Or that she was talking about seeing something on the set, or can you kind of go into that a little bit, what that was about?
There's a huge show in Britain called Dancing on Ice, and they have celebrities.
Oh, Dancing on Ice, okay.
And then, they twist their knees, shoot all the ligaments in their ankles. I mean, it's pretty horrific in terms of injuries for celebrities. There's been a few celebrities that have given themselves a year's worth of physiotherapy just by participating in that show. But the couple that host it, they also have a breakfast morning TV show called This Morning that's very popular. And the point they were making is that the studio that they do the ice show on is in a place called Bovingdon in Hertfordshire, and the studio is very haunted. The celebrities are saying they see mist, they get very strange smells coming through, they've seen shadow figures and all kinds of things. That studio was built over the top of what used to be a Second World War airfield. And it was an airfield, Bovingdon Airfield. It was actually given over by the British to the Americans so they could fly bombers out of there. I think they flew Liberators out of there during the Second World War.
Wow.
And I investigated that disused airfield about 12 to 15 years ago. A couple of times I was out there. And, of course, there's 2 miles of tarmac. I mean, they take a long time to get up in the air. So I did that many, many years ago, before paranormal investigating was popular or there was any TV shows.
Yep.
Well, it turns out that I'm one of the few people that actually investigated the airfield before they built a TV studio over the top of it.
Wow.
So when they were talking about the ghosts and the hauntings of the studio, I was... someone got hold of me and the journalist spoke to me about my findings. And lo and behold, I ended up in the British press, in the Daily Mirror and various other publications.
It's a big newspaper,
Oh, yeah,
right?
the 3 million copies of that are sold a day in Britain. The Daily Mirror is very popular.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I did manage to get myself into the British press just by default of having a little bit of information about the ghosts and hauntings of the airfield.
How did they know that you'd been there before? Like, how did they find that out?
On my website, I had a list of all the places I've investigated in the past, and it happened to have Bovingdon Airfield up there. So someone typed in Bovingdon Airfield and haunted, and my name came up, and then they contacted me from there. So if you go to my website, there's no evidence on there, but there's a couple of pages of all the places around the world. It probably needs updating by now, that I've investigated, and it just happened to be one of the words they searched for, and they stumbled across me via that.
Wow. Well, I saw that, and I'm like, that's pretty crazy.
Deep research there.
Well, I don't even know how I found that. Did you share it on Facebook or something,
I think
Adrian?
I must have done.
Yeah.
I read it out on my radio show. we read out stories of the paranormal and stories of the strange during the course of the week. And last Friday, for our Halloween special, I was reading that story out, and about 3/4 of the way through, it then mentions me. So I sat there reading the story out like I've done for the last 6 years every week. And then at the end, it mentions my name, and everyone was kind of booing and cheering. And it's funny to read out a news story of the paranormal where at the end you're actually in it, right?
Yeah. You didn't know that you were going to be in the article.
You didn't know it.
That's funny.
That's true enough. So that made me smile. I was happy about that.
Well, let's get into the new book because this just came out not that long ago, right? How long? When was the release date official?
About 2 or 3 weeks ago. I mean, the ink is still fairly wet, so yeah.
And just kind of talk about it a little bit because it's called Ghosts and UFOs.
Connecting paranormal phenomena through quantum physics. This has been a really interesting journey for me. We touched upon this. I was writing this over the last, 8 years, but I've been on this show a few times now.
Yeah.
Maybe the first time was even 3 or 4 years ago now, perhaps. I'm sure it goes back maybe that far.
2 years. Well, maybe was it the first episode was maybe that you were on, Adrian, was probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that. But we did last time you were on. You were talking about you're like I'm almost done with it, and then now you're on and it's done.
It's done. Yeah, it's a very interesting book. I started writing this book because I did a talk. I did a symposium for MUFON of Minnesota, as you know. My background's in art history. And I did a talk on UFOs in Renaissance art in a big symposium they had there about 12 years ago now. And they had a gentleman there giving a talk, and his name was Ted Phillips. And he was the assistant to Hynek during Project Blue Book. He was a ufologist that specialized in trace evidence, like, radiation burns and where the landing gear sits, on the soil when they land. So his expertise was in trace evidence. And it always makes me smile when people say, I don't believe in UFOs. And you think, well, what about all the trace evidence they leave behind? And they seem to forget about that.
What kind of trace evidence was he, or like were you guys, or not you guys, but was he able to dig up that could prove that UFOs were real?
He would go to sites after someone said a UFO had landed in their field, and you had depression marks in the soil from their landing gear. You would have high radiation levels. There would be burn and scorch marks, for example. There'd also be things like cattle mutilations, things like that.
Wow.
He said to me during that symposium, he said, I've got something to ask you. And this is the legendary ufologist Ted Phillips, right? And there's me messing around in basements with broken radios and flashlights, right? So he said to me, whenever there's a UFO landing, and he was studying a case in Missouri at the time, he said a UFO landed in a field. And the factory next door to the field, weeks after the landing, was suddenly juiced up with vast amounts of paranormal activity. There was people walking through walls, dead people everywhere. The factory workers refused to go to work on the back of this. And he said, what's your take on that? And I said, well, the energy that the UFO brings, having just discussed radiation, EMF and everything else, has obviously juiced the area up to make it a sort of finger buffet for any paranormal activity that wants to go through there. And I started to think to myself, ghosts and UFOs have quite a lot in common. The ufologist has got the same equipment in their case that I have. So we're measuring the same things. So I got thinking about that. And then, 8 years later, a book rolls around that talks about all the things UFOs and ghosts have in common. They share energy, they share the same way of moving around. And it ends up in the last couple of chapters talking about quantum physics and collective consciousness. And if you recall from my last interview I did with you, I pretty much said that most science is pretty useless and wrong. And it's amazing that contemporary science, even in the last 6 months, has proven many things that we thought were set in stone. So, for example, they've managed to turn photons, which is light, into solid matter. So imagine that. Yeah, that now means that lightsabers can actually exist. That now means you can have a blaster like Han Solo. They've actually turned photons into solid matter. They've managed to do an experiment where they've pushed mass through a mass. Now, you would think that mass can't pass through mass. If you took a run at that wall, you're not going through it, are you? You're going to meet the wall quite hard and not pass through. But they've now done experiments where they can push mass through mass. And if you're thinking of ghosts have the ability to pick things up, throw things at me, be physical. If they slam a door, or if you can hear their footsteps coming down the corridor, that's physicality.
Yeah.
Yet I've seen them walk through walls. So how can you be non-physical and physical at the same time? And science is now starting to prove that. And if you think about a UFO, if you're abducted, you're lying in your bed, they have to take you, a solid person, solid matter, through the roof line, through the ceiling, and into a vehicle. So they must be able to convert mass into a way of passing through other mass. And there's so many things they have in common. The one thing I thought was remarkable, and this really took my breath away, is that recently they've discovered that electrons and photons do not exist anywhere in the universe after you've observed them or you measure them. So you look at them, you observe them, you measure them. The moment you take your gaze away from them or you don't acknowledge them, they disappear. They don't exist anywhere in the universe until you observe them. And I found that to be remarkable. When you go to the furthest levels of quantum physics, it becomes mystical. It becomes paranormal. Who'd have thought that science could prove, that God exists, or quantum physics could prove that ghosts and UFOs exist? But that's the place we are at the moment.
Wow.
Just following on from the stuff that Stephen Hawking and Professor Rudy Shields are doing, was doing at Harvard, really. So it's a really interesting book to bind everything together and to say there's a commonality between all of the paranormal phenomena we experience in the world.
Yeah, well, there you go, Ethan. I was wondering how you could connect those, and when you hear footsteps, people say they hear footsteps with ghosts, or to lighten it up. I was watching TV, and Casper the Friendly Ghost was in a commercial, and he's eating some type of corn chips or something, and I was wondering how that worked.
Well, now we know.
And I was watching to see if they fell through them, and I think he was actually eating them.
Just to get this right, I've just spent 10 minutes discussing quantum physics.
I'm sorry, Adrian.
And you bring up Casper.
That's where my head was, Adrian.
But you are 100% correct, of course. What I'm thinking
I'm trying to, our audience,
for the kids,
for our audience, and explaining this.
I was thinking of Slimer with a mouthful of hot dogs. Now that's where I'm going.
That's funny. My question was, this just came out not that long ago. Edward Snowden, the big whistleblower, came forward and said that the United States government has no knowledge, or is not hiding, or has never ever seen any UFOs or aliens before.
Right.
And do you think that is something that is verifiable, or is he just watching out for himself? He knows stuff he shouldn't know.
I know for a fact that's 100% not true. I have no idea why he would say that and why that would benefit him. But Truman, your president in the 50s, came out, April, I think it was, 1954 maybe. I'll have to check my dates. But he said in a press conference that UFOs exist and they're not made of anything from this earth. Your president was quoted as actually saying that. But recently, in the last couple of years, if they don't exist, why has your government spent $22 million on a program to find out recently what UFOs are? And they actually have a facility. Robert Bigelow has a facility in Las Vegas where he actually admits that they house UFO artifacts.
What's the ranch called out there?
I can't remember the name. I know they've put a big logo on the side of an alien's head just to make it look quite subtle and to hide everything they're doing. And the British government has actually given Bigelow a vast sum of money as well to house all of our findings and all of our objects. So if he says the US government has never seen anything, why does your president come out and say they exist? Why is your government giving vast sums of money to organizations to house, ufology and UFOs and create defense programs to work out if UFOs are problematic to us or not. You wouldn't waste money on anything like that if you didn't think it was real. Surely that would seem an odd thing to be doing.
Ethan, did that Snowden hack into systems that he said was proving that, or is that where the basis he was basing that off of?
He just he released the biggest.
That is kind of a different angle for him to take on.
Someone asked him about it because he's seen an unbelievable amount of private, confidential information for the security and safety of the United States citizens, because he blew, he's obviously living in Russia now because of the United States. If he comes back here, he's done for.
Right.
So he's living in what do you call it? He can be there because they accepted him or whatever.
Some type of immunity.
Yeah. So, but they pretty much asked him, you've seen all this stuff. You've seen a lot of confidential information. Is the United States hiding anything, or do you know of anything? And he said no. So, and I don't understand why, because he obviously is a kind of not against the United States, but he wants to let people know stuff. But it's kind of weird that he wouldn't say anything about aliens. Maybe he never got that far.
I would say that what he's seen probably represents such a small percentage,
for sure.
0.0001 of everything that's out there. That that's like me saying I don't believe that baseball exists. I'm going to stand here now and say baseball does not exist. It's all made up because I've never seen a game. But if I went to a stadium, I'd probably see a game, and then I'd say that baseball exists. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Yeah. I've never seen a baseball game, so am I about to sit here and say it doesn't exist? But I wondered what narrow kind of percentage he's seeing.
Yeah.
And based on everything I've just discussed, with your government spending vast sums of money, putting these programs in place, and your own presidents admitting in news conferences that they exist, would make me think that he's not seeing the whole picture or seeing the things he needs to see.
And it was kind of a random question for him, too. I don't remember what program it was that interviewed him or whatever, but it was a random question.
I think it was Joe Rogan, probably, wasn't it?
He was just on Joe Rogan, but I think it was a different news interview. And I'm wondering why he's starting to do more interviews now. He's popping up more and more because that happened a while back.
He was running low on attention.
He's trying to come back to the United States, I'm pretty sure, actually, and he's hoping that they give him a fair trial. But after everything that he blew, I don't know if that'll happen.
You don't often get the words fair trial in the United States in the same sentence, do you?
No,
And I'm aware of my audience, of course, but there are many cases where those two things don't sit together, do they, in the history of America?
No, not at all. Why don't we look at the UFO footage, Adrian? Because I'm really interested while we're talking about this. Where was this taken at?
Well, this was taken last summer in Redwood Falls. We were in the cemetery. So there's myself. The gentleman to my right there is Brian Sterling Vitae. He's a film director, author. He used to be on Star Trek: The Next Generation, actually.
Wow.
So we're there. He used to be a BBC journalist that did reporting from war-torn areas. So there were 6 of us out there together, 2 doctors, a couple of authors, and some government workers, and we're doing a paranormal investigation, and suddenly we see a UFO. Now, this footage is about 45 minutes long, so what I've done is clip just 3 minutes for you. So we look over our shoulder, and there's this massive orange ball of light that's moving, erratically in the air, and all of our equipment is going nuts. Most UFO... if you're looking to report UFOs, someone comes along afterwards, a MUFON, and then they actually investigate. So it's all retrospective. So what you're getting here is we had the equipment laid out for an investigation, and our EMF meters are going off, our static meters, a GPS is blocked, my scanning device isn't working. So we're getting empirical data while it's actually taking place, and that's never happened before in the history of ufology. So we have 3 UFOs, one after the other, in 45 minutes of video, and this is in night vision mode, of course, and you're seeing the erratic movements of a UFO one after the other, leaving empirical data on our science equipment. And this took place in Redwood Falls Cemetery, just down the road from here.
Wow.
And it was reported to MUFON. It has a case number, and it's one of the most important UFO sightings in the history of ufology.
Wow.
We'll have to get Michael on that if he hasn't already. I was going to say,
are you zooming in, Adrian, or zooming out, or is it just moving farther away?
It's moving further away. It eventually just disappears.
Oh, so there's one, and then there's another one over here.
Yeah, there's 3, and they follow each other, and they do the same erratic pattern. The second one was red and was burning bright red. There was no wind that evening. We're not over any flight paths. There was no
What do you think they were doing?
I just think they were traveling across the country to go to somewhere else. I had the option of lighting up the cemetery with a laser grid pen, but the rest of the team didn't want to highlight the fact that we were there. And they got cold feet and thought perhaps if there was UFOs going overhead, it probably wasn't a good idea to make them aware of our presence, right?
Those pens are awesome.
We kind of declined that opportunity.
Are those legal? Are they legal?
You can't shine them up into the sky, but I mean, I can light the cemetery up for sure.
Yeah, point it down.
I've got a grid. I've got a grid.
Work?
I'm surprised you don't have one, Ethan.
No.
They're like a giant lightsaber, and they're so powerful. They point out, like, I saw them out at the petroglyphs, Jeff from Petroglyphs, and we were doing a Star Watch, and you'd point to the constellations with them.
Oh, is it just a really strong laser pointer?
Pretty much.
Oh, my cousin had one of those, yeah. You can see the beam all the way up.
What we have is a grid pen, so you press it and it lights up like a grid.
That's
really
cool.
And it goes for miles. So that was just a clip that we cut.
Wow.
That was 2 or 3 minutes long, but the actual footage
I should get one of those
lasts for 45 minutes altogether. So it was a unique situation. It's one of the chapters
you talk
in my
about
book.
it in the book.
Absolutely, the Redwood Falls UFO incident. But remarkable that we went out there to do a paranormal investigation. And then we see that.
So did it just blank your ghost box? Because you had that on here one time. Or did it stop on a channel and did anything come through it or it just made it not work?
Did you have that thing with you, Adrian?
I did, yeah. I'm holding it in my hand right at the beginning. What it actually did, and I'll do a really good impression for you. This has never happened. I'd never heard this device do this before in 25 years. But it went.
Can we hear it if we play the volume from that video?
It may be a possibility. I don't know.
Try playing. I'll turn it all the way up. See if we can hear it.
It's
Do you
just.
know who murdered you? Yes or no?
Oh, I hear. Yeah.
That's never done that.
What the heck?
Yeah, you can hear it.
I can hear it. Yeah, you can hear the whoa, whoa, whoa.
It was a good impression, wasn't it?
Yeah, we're spot on.
I was going to say,
Spot on.
What would that be then? Is that an alien spaceship or like contact noise? Some kind of,
It's going to be electrical magnetic. Do you know when you pick up static or, you put your cell phone next to something or a radio and it has feedback? The only thing I can think of, I don't think they'd be blocking anything because they didn't know we were down there. It's pitch dark. We're in the middle of a cemetery. The only thing I can think of is there was something emitting from that UFO that actually interfered with what we're doing. Do you know when you go under power cables and your radio cuts out when you're in the car?
Yep.
Something like that would be my best guess.
Wow.
But the interesting thing was you can see us looking at each other, and in the 45-minute clip, we're having a conversation where I'm saying, why is nothing working? And why are all these lights coming on? I've never seen any of this. And you get all that.
Yep.
And then you see us turns
around. Turns the camera quick
and there's a UFO standing over us. So that's
it's
an
making
interesting...
the noise to the box.
How fast do you think they were moving, Adrian? Because we watched a UFO video, the Tic Tac video, a couple weeks back, and that thing was moving like unbelievably. A fighter jet couldn't keep up with it. How fast do you think these were going through the sky?
It wasn't a sense that it was going fast. It was just very erratic. I think there were moments, and you kind of got a flavour of that from the film, that it may have dropped sort of 10,000 feet almost within seconds. It's going up and down. And there was a very famous case, the Iran... Tehran dogfight from 1976 when they put out 2 fighter planes. There's been numerous accounts where fighter planes can't catch up with UFOs and they can't, seem to get them in their sights. They move around too fast. It was very erratic. Certainly it's moving fast enough to drop, go up, left, right.
Because I thought you were zooming in and zooming out. That's why the ball was getting bigger.
No, he wasn't zooming in and out at all. That's how it was. We had it on the fullest aperture to catch, as close as we could. That sense of it moving around. The person that was on the camera was holding it still, was holding it steady. Everything you see isn't them trying to catch up or move with it. You're seeing the movements of the UFO on a static camera in effect.
Yeah.
So it going far away and coming back again wasn't the camera going in and out of focus. That was the UFO moving around.
Was that the only time that you've seen anything like that before? Like, was this the only time that you've actually got that good of footage of something?
Oh yeah, that's the first time I videoed a UFO. I've seen UFOs in the past, but of course you never have a camera with you. And again, we were filming the Paranormal Investigation, so we've got to film a camera there. In night vision mode because we were filming our Paranormal Investigation.
It's kind of an accident.
That's right, absolutely, 100% correct. And it was a case of look at that up there, and then the camera pans around. So just to get something is a result. And you know as well as I do through being a cameraman that was closer than it looks on the camera because of the lenses you're using. Do you see what I mean?
Well, and you went to MUFON, right? You went to a presentation. Did you show that footage?
I did, yes, and they have that footage. They're going to put the whole 45 minutes on a YouTube video.
Really?
And I did play that to them. I did a talk on my book. If people are interested,
I was gonna say,
go on YouTube, search for Adrian Lee, Ghosts, UFOs, MUFON. You'll find my lecture that I did on this book. It's free. It's 2 hours long. You can watch that.
Wow.
And during the course of that lecture, I played the ufologists that video, and no one walked out. There was no fist fights. So I must have been reasonable in the things I was talking about.
What did they think about it? Were they very like blown away, or had they seen stuff like this before?
You didn't promise them snacks at the end, Adrian?
When you say were they surprised or were they blown away, there speaks a man who's never been to a MUFON lecture. They're very dry, very scientific, very laid back. If a herd of ghost wildebeest would have gone through there, they'd have sat there quietly and not said anything. A few people were unhappy that I make the statement that ufology is dead. You know, when we talk about ufology and studying ufology, everything we talk about is things that happened in the 50s and 60s where UFOs landed in a field and a farmer went up to them and tapped them and threw rocks at them and they got radiation burns and so on. That's nuts and bolts ufology. It's vehicles, stuff you can touch, little green men running around with spacesuits on. And there was hundreds and hundreds of reports of stuff like that in the 50s and 60s. Recently, that just doesn't happen anymore. If we want to keep studying that kind of nuts and bolts ufology, you're just going backwards. You're just looking retrospectively at old cases that are 50, 60 years old. If you go to the MUFON database, and anyone can access this, if you go to the MUFON database, the top 10 of all the things that are cited in America each month is energy and light. Wow. There's no nuts and bolts. When was the last time someone walked up to a UFO that landed in a field and touched it? It hasn't happened for 50, 60 years.
No.
So if you want to study that, that's great. But where's the evolution? Where's the development? How's that pushing forward the study of ufology?
Yeah.
You've got to remember that ufology started because after the Cold War, they suddenly realized there was a thing called Foo Fighters, those little balls of light that used to fly around bombers and fighter planes during the Second World War. And then in Sweden, in about 46, 47, they had a thing called the Swedish ghost rockets, and they saw strange lights and strange phenomena in the sky. And the US military said to themselves, if the Russians are doing strange stuff and strange testing, or if there's aliens out there, we need to know what they're doing and we need to look at their technology. Otherwise, we're going to get left behind. So they set up all these organizations. Vast sums of money were spent, which again makes me think that, when he says they don't know anything, I find that hard to believe. And I think they thought they were going to resolve it in about 3 or 4 years. Well, here we are in 2019, and we're no further to knowing what they originally decided they would study in 47 and 48. So obviously the way of studying UFOs has to change. We're not going any further down the path. So what I suggest in this book is a whole new way of studying them and a whole new way of looking at UFOs, and to sit there in front of a group of old men that have spent their entire life studying 1960s and 1950s, ufology, probably wasn't the best thing I could have said. But I did give them some options of how we could progress and what we could do, and they seem to be fairly happy with it.
And Adrian, I know your books are full of history, so is that history of UFOs like in the 50s and 60s? Did you include that in that book? And
absolutely.
History?
And I go back further than that. I spend a chapter looking at how UFOs and ghosts have spent an entire generation with us. From the dawn of time, we've been painting UFOs on cave walls. Ghosts have been talked about and they've been depicted as well. I mean, literally from the dawn of time, when we climbed out of the trees and thought that was a good idea, they've been with us. Since that period. There's medieval tapestries, there's paintings from the Renaissance period. The first UFO documented comes from the Roman times, and they saw some vehicles or lights over Rome that they documented and so forth. So they have shared, the same sort of path. And both UFOs and ghosts, we're no further down the road to knowing what they are. So they sit quite well together in the fact they've been with us since the dawn of time. We've studied them and are still further not knowing what they are, to be honest. So we have to change how we look at them and how we study them if we're going to progress at any point.
Ethan, I have another question. It's kind of on topic, and I think it'd be interesting because you're an art history major. Do you ever feel like the original painting maybe you're next to a study and feel something off of those paintings?
Oh, good question,
I would agree with that, but I wouldn't say just a painting. I'd say any object.
Any object.
If there has been energy put into that painting, then that energy comes back to you in the same way that if your grandmother sat in the same chair for 10 years watching the TV.
There's a lot of energy put into artwork.
Her energy's in there. You're right. I'm thinking off the top of my head, the first thing I think of is Picasso's Guernica that was painted due to the Spanish Civil War and the Germans bombing a Spanish town and all those thousands of people, dying under Franco's rule and being blown up.
That one has
bombed.
a horse that looks like it's all contorted. And
it's behind bulletproof glass. It's politically very, very sensitive. In the week, of course, that Franco's body was moved out of its crematorium and put back into Madrid. And so, yes, there's energy attached to those. Every time we look at that, we're putting energy out there, a collective consciousness of what these things are. So, yes, I would agree with that. But then I would then say that's true of any object. Yes. This bottle, could have energy if we all sit and looked at it for 5 minutes and kind of put that into that object, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the weirdest thing is we're talking about how, things have changed and how there's not as much stuff coming forward, which is strange because the advancement of technology, everyone has a beautiful camera in their pocket.
Yes.
The iPhone has 4K, great pictures. It's weird that there's not more pictures and stuff showing up. I wonder if the aliens are catching on or whatever to the fact that we can capture them. And I'm just saying, what if they've evolved as well as we've evolved?
No,
they have the Apple 15.
They're way ahead of the game. They know that we can.
Now,
they know that we have the capability to capture them at our, in our pockets.
I 100% agree with you. I dedicate a couple of pages to the fact that the suggestions made that the UFOs are now cloaking themselves because they're now being filmed and, they've actually put something in place to stop that from happening. What I would suggest, and I don't want to go into this too deeply, but we have a thing called the psychology of perception. We recognize things around us because we have a visual language and we're learning clues about symbolism. So our ancestors, just 100 years ago, your great-granddad wouldn't know what an arrow meant. No. Arrows were an invention of the sort of 1880s. So when you see one-way street and an arrow, your great-grandfather wouldn't know what that arrow meant. It's only because we know it means go that way that we know by looking at that arrow, you go that way.
Yeah.
Before the 1880s, they used a finger pointing with a little cuff. If you saw Victorian posters, it would say this way, and it would use a finger and a hand.
Yep.
But if you point to a dog, if you say to your dog, look at that over there, the dog doesn't look over there. He looks at your finger because the dog doesn't understand what that means.
Yep.
And so I think what's taken place is we had a visual language that we knew about nuts and bolts UFOs. We saw aluminum planes like Liberators and B-52s. We had an understanding of plate metal and welding and everything else. And so we had the ability to see vehicles like that.
Yeah.
I think in today's society, we know more about energy. We're more liable to see orbs and lights and have an understanding of what energy is. And so now, in contemporary society, we see more sightings of lights and orbs because we're geared to see lights and orbs over stuff in the 1950s where you saw those terrible B movies with flying saucers in, right?
Yeah.
So it's a reflection of society as well, I would suggest, and our capabilities of seeing things that we perhaps wouldn't see previously due to an evolution of our psychology of perception, if that's not too deep.
No, it isn't.
It's a good way to put it, yeah.
And someone wrote, I don't know if it was in the 50s, but one of the first newspaper articles, someone says something like flying discs or flying saucers. And that's what caught on. And then we always talk about movies imitating life and life imitating movies.
Yep.
And then all the movies ran.
Was that Roswell? Was the first big one the Roswell incident? Was that the first big major UFO?
There was a few before that, but that was the one that sort of caught the public's imagination and the one that people go back to. But that's quite early. When I did a live paranormal radio show out of Minneapolis, I actually interviewed the gentleman that found the original debris, and I believe he's dead now, and I can't remember his name. I think he was a major maybe. He took, if you remember, he took the debris, put it on the back of his pickup, drove it to his home, woke his kids up at 3 a.m. and said, look at this, and actually interviewed that gentleman live on air, and he discussed what that looked like and that process. But unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But that was certainly something that first caught the imagination, and maybe through ufology into the consciousness a little bit more, I would suggest, for sure.
Wow. Well, speaking of evidence and stuff, Colin, you had a picture you were going to show Adrian.
Yeah. Well, let's look
we had a viewer send in a picture of, a camera that he had in his house, Colin, and it captured a picture.
Yeah, he said he was watching episode 26, which was probably the second time Adrian
Second time you were on, Adrian. And he sent us this picture he took in his house. No one was home, and he catches somebody on one of his cameras running by in his house. I don't know if you've ever seen anything like this before. We'll put this up for the viewers.
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely a figure in there.
Show Damon, Colin, too.
Caught on a game camera.
Yeah, there's a figure with fingers. You can see that.
Where am I looking?
Right here.
Right. Zoom in on it, Colin, a little bit. There's somebody right there.
They're standing up, and you can see their hands. The only thing I would say, I'm willing to believe that's real because I've seen so many strange and bizarre things in my life. I'm willing to believe everything now until it's proved otherwise. The only hesitation I have is you can do so much now with apps and various things. I've seen stuff that looks like ghosts on cameras before because, they take the picture as you're walking by and it just gets the blur or you get a little bit of it. I've actually seen as well on a digital camera where it's overlapped 2 photographs and you wouldn't think that was possible on a digital camera. The old cameras, you could take a picture. You'll remember this. You're as old as me. You remember you could take a double exposure by accident over the same thing. I've actually seen that happen with a digital camera, and you wouldn't think that would be possible, would you? So he's certainly captured something there. It's certainly paranormal would be a good term because it can't be explained. It's difficult for science to prove what's taking place there. He's definitely got something worth seeing, and it's
the fingers look like pointed, don't they?
Yeah, it looks like you're seeing the backside, to be honest, and the kind of hands are down.
Yeah. Colin, why does he have a game camera set up in his house?
I don't know.
Is it just taking still pictures or is it from a video?
Well, it's a game camera, so to capture movement.
Oh, the game camera. I was thinking of video.
The only thing I'm wondering, if it's a game camera, how come you can see through the person? Because game cameras will take a picture exactly at that moment, and it shouldn't be a blurry picture. That's my only question: is why would it be?
There are more questions than answers.
Yeah, and I know you don't know enough about it either, and we just kind of threw it on you.
Yeah,
you don't
absolutely. Things reflect off of other things. There's stuff bouncing around, but there's definitely an anomaly in there. I'm not denying that. I just don't have the tools to be able to. I'd like to know what the other pictures look like that were taken, and what was the lens, and how long was the exposure, and all the boring stuff.
Yeah.
Do you know
Back in 2011, so I don't know what other pictures he has, but he just sent me that. He said he was watching episode 26 and made him think back on that picture.
Yeah. And I know it's weird. You get a lot of people sending you stuff, Adrian, asking you, is this a ghost? Is this,
if I had $1 for every one, I'd be very rich.
Get that buck out, Colin.
Yeah.
The problem lies in the fact that I don't know what their response is meant to be. Am I meant to say, well, that's fantastic or that's bunk? I mean, I don't know what they want from me. The problem lies in the fact that they so want it to be a relative. So they'll have a picture and they'll say, this was my birthday party and here's an orb and I think it's my grandmother looking over me, and they're getting really emotional. How can I sit there and say, I think you'll find that's pollen or dust? Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just tend to be very polite and very English and say, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, you've got something interesting.
I'm sure if it's your grandmother, she loves you.
That's the sort of thing, yeah.
It's got to be tough, if you're not there, because you conduct investigations and you spend all the time, gathering. Maybe just you spend all night and you get one good picture where, some random person just stumbles across something.
In a controlled environment, I might add, with static cameras, areas that are locked off. I mean, we go about it in a very scientific way so we don't get false positives or mess up our evidence.
And that's where I'll bring up, Ethan, kind of on our last podcast, too, we had a list of things not to ask psychics.
Psychics,
yeah. And I think those were, I looked at that afterwards, and it's better to ask open-ended questions than just yes-no questions. So I think she got those questions, and they're good questions, but they don't phrase them as like yes or no, like phrase your question differently. So like
I'm interested now. What shouldn't you ask a psychic?
Go back.
I'm now interested to know.
I have the one
here. The list.
57. The one that I did see on the list, and I'm like, I don't know if this is a good question. Maybe people have asked you, Adrian. This would be a good one to answer. Not should I leave my husband/wife? That's got to be a tough one.
I tend to say if you have to ask.
That's what I was gathering.
That's pretty good.
That's what I was gathering too.
No, the other ones though were kind of like they're questions that normal people, people would ask. Will I get married? Will I have money? Will I be happy? What about my family? Will they be happy?
I'd be like, you'd get married if you find the right one. You don't want to say yes or no.
These are questions I feel like people do ask.
They
psychics.
do, yeah. Your spirit guides will know the answer to some of those. Again, if a lady comes up to me and says, I've just met a guy, is he the guy I'm meant to be with? Again, I'd say, well, if you have to ask. I mean, you know the person you need to be with. The angels will sing. Your heart will beat fast. You don't need to see some strange English guy you've never met before to tell you if that's the relationship you should be in.
That's
Do
a good
you see
answer.
What I mean?
Yeah. Dang. Well, why don't we bring up some of the pictures that you had, Adrian?
Is that in this or files?
It was on your Facebook. Yeah.
I've given you a whole selection of weird and strange and bizarre things here.
Go start from the beginning, Colin. You jumped up here, too.
No, I didn't.
That's the one.
Oh, that's the first one? Okay.
This was recently. This was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I can see it.
It's 130 years ago this month that William Rose was accused of the murder of Moses Lufkin in Redwood Falls. And he was hung for this. He was hung twice because the rope snapped and they had to hang him a second time. And it's the only person ever to be executed in Redwood Falls. And they finally got round to the execution in 1890, I believe, 1891, around that area.
Wow.
But that's the jail cell. The jail cell he spent his final night in before they hung him actually exists. And we were doing some filming there. We're making a film and a documentary about the life of William Rose, and we're doing paranormal investigating and the history that we do.
Wow.
And we had an actor doing a reenactment, and the actor was hanging onto the bars and kind of looking out wistfully. You've made films, imagine the guy, it's his last night in a jail cell before he's hung. The actor's crying, he's holding onto the bars, he's looking wistfully at his freedom. And when they called cut, the actor left. You may see a little bit of him on the right-hand side there as he's leaving the shop. We were running an Sls camera. And an SLS camera works almost like a Wii games console. Do you know when you set up that little bar on your television and it notices the movements? You can play tennis and bowl and stuff. It's the same scenario. It's like a radar and it's firing out radar, but it's designed to pick up electrical magnetic fields. So what it's done there is it's found an articulated ghost, a spirit, copying what the actor did a minute before by holding on to the bars. And that's been found on an SLS camera by picking up the EMF and articulating it and putting it in place using the technology they use in games consoles. So it's an expensive piece of kit, but I've never seen a ghost in the jail cell there actually copy what the actor was doing, and he's hanging onto the bars like the actor was doing a minute before they called cut. So that was a really interesting photograph, and you can see the jail cell on the right-hand side with the bed.
Yeah.
And,
so to get this straight, if the actor was in that shot, the green lines would be traced around him.
You would actually see the actor. I think there's another picture coming up. You'll actually see the actor in the shot. So there's the actor.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So those green lines just move around your ligaments or whatever. So that one picked up something that's not there, and it traced it.
Perfect.
Wow, that's crazy.
You nailed it. Do you know when they do video games and they put someone in a suit and they put little ping pong balls on them?
Oh, okay.
It has that sort of technology about it.
Wow.
But the actor that did the reenactment is praying on the bed because we're filming him praying. There was lots of diary entries where he said he prayed the night before he was hung. So we got the actor to pray on the bed with his Bible and rosary, and we got a nice shot of that.
Wow.
Is this the spirit hanging then?
And there's the ghost kind of behind him looking on. So you can see the articulation where it's found the actor in the same way that it would find you in your lounge if you're playing tennis, right?
Yep.
What you then get is the spirit behind him hovering in the air, sort of observing him and watching what he's doing.
Wow. Well, and is there video like where you can actually see the thing, the spirit moving around?
Yeah, I've given you some still shots. You can imagine the video takes up so much memory that I'd have to have brought in some sort of hard drive to play that for you. But you're 100% correct. There's video attached to this. Yeah.
That's crazy.
You can see it moving around.
Oh, what's that about?
Look at those ghosts.
That's crazy. I've never seen anything like that before. That's very interesting.
See, again, you see the spirit hanging onto the bars. So there is a sense of movement there. You're getting a couple of pictures where I can show that to you. In fact, there's me on the right-hand side. That's me working out the shot and what we're doing next. And,
you use this technology quite a bit, or is this something new for you to use?
We've had it around for a couple of years now, so we do use it quite often. It's just very difficult in some of the locations we're shooting in because you need a laptop. You've got to set the camera up and run the leads and the wires. So if you're in a battlefield, that's impossible to set up. But in an environment that is enclosed and you're inside, it's a lot easier to work with.
Yep, that's unbelievable. What do we got here?
Again, this is a digital camera. I took a photograph looking down some stairs. This is in Long Prairie in Todd County.
Wow.
And we're in the Opera House. And that set of stairs goes down to the sidewalk, and the Opera House upstairs is derelict. And I took a photograph just for my book. I didn't realize a shadow figure was going to be in the picture, but you're seeing somebody walking down the stairs. And again, remember, you don't get, this is a digital camera, so it's difficult to get false positives with that.
Yeah.
And you get a sense that there's a hooded figure or someone walking down the stairs that wasn't there when I took the photograph. I just took that purely for documentary reasons, just so I could have a reminder. I take a lot of photographs because when I write my books, I want to have a really nice detailed explanation of the building I'm in. So based on that photo, I'd say I looked down the steep steps and the paint was peeling on the walls. I could see the lights of the sidewalk. It gives you a chance to be artistic and to be descriptive and to put the person there. Wow. So I didn't take that, with an eye to being a paranormal investigator. I took that with an eye to, let's remind myself what this looks like. So when I write this up, I can do some creative writing and place the person in the book.
Interesting thing on this picture too, and if you're listening, you'll have to check it out. You can see through the one figure, but you can see a shadow past the shadow figure.
Yeah.
Yes, it's actually casting a shadow on the wall because my flash has gone off.
Oh, you did use a flash. I was gonna say, what if this was a shadow of you? But if you used a flash, that wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, this one wasn't done as a paranormal investigator. This was done as someone who just wanted to document what a peeling paint passageway looked like. So it actually threw a shadow. You're 100% correct.
That's crazy.
Onto the wall.
It threw a shadow of a shadow person. Wow.
This is the basement of the furnace room of the disused school in Morton, which is in Renville County, and it's pretty grim in there. There's lots of broken light bulbs. This school was abandoned in about 1987, 88. So people have gone in there. In fact, I think you may have done a video where you ran around in there. I can't remember. I know you've been to various
places. It looks very familiar, Ethan.
We've been there a while.
Somebody was in there.
Somebody was in there, yeah.
So
I think it was you, Adrian.
That would be me. And again, you see two of my investigators sitting there, and you see an orb going through the lights. And it's actually emitting its own light. It isn't the flash reflected back. We saw it with our own eyes. It's weaving between the lights. And if you go on to the next image,
looks like R2D2 back there.
I believe. Yes, we always take. Boba Fett was in the other room.
I was going to say they're doing so many Star Wars movies. We're actually going to see real lightsabers.
Oh, so you did a long exposure here to get it without the.
Yeah, that was just a close up. That's just a close up of what that is. And I will leave you with this. It's very interesting. We talk about ghosts and UFOs. It's interesting that an orb, a light emitting energy in the basement when you see it is an orb. But if you saw that in the sky, that's a UFO. Because that looks very similar to the video. The reason I included this is because this would be considered to be paranormal activity and energy, and I'd consider this to be ghostly.
Wow.
But when you saw this in the sky for the video I just showed you, we now label that as a UFO. So it's very interesting that dependent on where you see it is how you demarcate what you're seeing. And if I'm writing about ghosts and UFOs, the only thing that's changed between the video and what I saw there in the basement is the location that you saw it in. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. My only question would be, how do you differentiate the two? If that could be a UFO, we don't know, because if it looks the same as the UFO you saw in the sky, would it only be the difference of size that would make it a UFO?
It would be the size, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Location, if it's in a building.
Yeah, true. Well, I didn't know if UFOs could go inside of buildings or not.
Well, I'm sure that's possible. In my book, there's been several accounts of people that thought they were being haunted and saw ghosts, and it actually turned out to be UFO activity and aliens.
Really?
So the two have been, the lines are blurred in many respects between aliens and ghosts in some people's thinking.
So with quantum physics, with quantum leaps, like we're talking about the light, you don't think it's materializing to a material when you're seeing them in the sky. It's more just the energy. Is that? It's
difficult to say what they are, to be honest, but that is obviously energy. And if it's causing a high reading of EMF and static on my meters, that would indicate that that's emitting energy. And energy, of course, is information. Einstein had all this worked out. Energy is information, and information is energy. So if that's a ghost and that's energy, it has information in it about who the person is and their personalities and their character, and that's who I'm talking to, and that's who I'm having a dialogue
It's very, very insightful what your mind connects with UFOs, like Adrian said a little while ago, like what you feel as a UFO, like the shiny objects, or now the light that we're talking about.
Sure.
It's tough, and the more and more that you get into it, the more you realize it could be either. You don't know exactly which one it is.
100% correct, yes. And again, this is why they're linked together in my work.
Wow.
This was a photograph we took at Birch Coulee, and Birch Coulee was a battle during the US Dakota War in 1862, and we did this summer. And there's actually a face in there. We used a full spectrum camera, and we're looking at the prairie, and 25 soldiers died that were under attack by the US Dakota, and 90 horses were slaughtered. So I do think I've got other pictures that show that a little bit closer up and a little bit better, but there is a face in there. And I know we want to see faces in things. I mean, you look at your wallpaper late at night, don't you, and you see faces and so on.
Is it like a guy kind of that's his nose and 2 eyes and mouth?
That's the sort of thing, yeah.
Wow.
And again,
mustache.
The saw guy.
Yeah.
The saw guy, there you go.
You've also got to remember that this sits in isolation when we look at it now. What you have to remember is at the moment when we're doing this investigation and we get this photograph, we've got meters going off, we've got high levels of energy being registered, we've had a 20-minute conversation with a ghost called Bertrand who said he was out there and was killed during the Dakota War that I then back up with historical evidence. So this sits coldly on its own as we're talking about it now. And as it stands, you wouldn't necessarily say that was good evidence. When I then add everything we got at that moment that then guides us towards this, that's then more impressive because we're building it up from other sources and other places.
Exactly, yeah. No, that makes sense a lot. Wow. Keep going through it. What else do we got? Oh, we got the... Okay.
So that's the original photograph.
Oh, wow.
And my equipment is set up on my case there. There's a static meter, there's some motion detectors and so forth. And that was a close-up there going past all the meters into the undergrowth. And there was a moment where we saw figures standing looking at us through the undergrowth. And this is where the heaviest fighting took place. This is in the middle of the prairie in Birch Coulee, and they were pinned down for 2 days solid. Wow. It was the biggest loss of life for the US Army during the US Dakota War, and a lot of killing took place on that site. And there were figures in the prairie there and in the undergrowth looking back at us, and just an example of a face that came through based on our camera there.
That's crazy. Wow. And so it would have been right above your case where it is.
You've got it. Yeah, you can pretty much see where there's a little bit of light there.
Yeah. But wow. What's this MP3 clip, Colin? Can we go find that on there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to include this. If you've got a chance to play this, this is my favorite EVP, and I don't think I've played this for you before. So let me just preface this and tell you what's going to happen. This is like the golden egg of EVPs, and I don't remember whether I've played this for you before, but I was in a theatre called the Wheating Theatre, and it's in Tamar County in Iowa. It's a fabulous Art Deco theatre, exactly how you'd imagine, with all the gold and the cherubs and everything else. It's a non-profit organisation. Underneath the stage is the green room, so they've got mirrors with light bulbs around them where the actors would get dressed and put on their costumes and their makeup.
Yeah.
I'm sat in the darkness with my team. Psychically, I suddenly see a guy appear, and he's about to walk up the stairs to go onto the stage. So in this clip, the first thing you hear me say is, there's a guy standing over there. So psychically, I tell my team I've just seen someone appear. I then turn on the ghost box and I say, tell me what your name is. And you hear him respond, and he says, Peter, Peter, on the ghost box. I then repeat that so my team knows what the individual said. When I turn the ghost box off, very quietly in the background, you hear the ghost say his name again, but not on the equipment, it's an EVP. So you've got me saying, there's a guy standing by the corner over there. I turn on the ghost box, he says, Peter, Peter. You then hear him go, Peter, Peter, in the background without any equipment. And then I turn the ghost box on again and ask him again, and he says, Peter again. Wow. So in that 6 or 7 seconds, you've got me being psychic. You've got an amazing voice coming through on the ghost box, the scanner. You then have an EVP, which corroborates the other two. And then finally, he says his name again on the scanner. So if you play that, we can play it a couple of times perhaps, but that's what we're listening for.
Yeah, wow, let's hear this.
Absolutely, that's a clarification of that. I think there's a guy down here and that woman. Could you tell me the name of the man that's down here? Peter.
Listen.
Oh.
Do you prefer being called Pete or Peter?
So we can play that again. After I cough and I turn the scanner off, I think you heard it because, I heard you gasp, but you hear him say, Peter, Peter.
I definitely heard that.
So did you hear that live? Did you hear that one live?
No, I didn't hear that live.
Play it one more time, Colin. Let's just hear it one more time here.
Good question.
Absolutely, that's a clarification of that. I think there's a guy down here and that woman. Could you tell me the name of the man that's down here? Peter.
Right there.
Do you prefer being called Pete or Peter?
So what you've got there, imagine this, you've got the psychic saying someone's arrived.
Yeah.
You've got the ghost box, the scanner saying Peter, Peter, which corroborates the fact that someone's arrived. You have an EVP without any equipment at all where the ghost says Peter, Peter, and we didn't hear that in real time. We heard that during our evidence review.
Yeah.
You then get that corroborated again, which is improving my evidence. It's not coincidence. When I ask again on the ghost box his name, he says Peter again. Wow. Now you've got this amazing little triangle of all these things going on. And then to add to that, I then did my historical research, and a week later I'm in the library and I'm going through everything in Tamar County and the history of the place. And one of the guys who founded the town, who was a prominent resident there back in the 1870s, his name was Peter Peters.
Peter Peters.
And I have a picture of him, and I've got all of his census details, and he was one of the founders of the town. So you've got the psychic, the EVP, the ghost box twice, and then the history. I mean, if you were to say that ghosts didn't exist, I'd now sit you down and say, explain how all that just happened.
That is crazy.
So that's a really nice little clip. It's only a short clip, but everything's happening. Yeah. You get it all. Yeah. And then the history to back all that up, which corroborates what you're getting.
Wow. Yeah, the golden egg.
The golden egg.
That's how I described it.
The special stuff, yeah. Well, and another thing that people talk about is, it comes up a lot. I think it was the Celtics that were the first people to say it, but the veil is opened up around this time of year. What does that mean? Why is the veil thinner? Why does it fall around Halloween? What does that mean for us?
Sure. You're going to get a history lesson now, I'm afraid.
That's what we want.
Yeah. The Celts were around 2,000 years ago, and they were the Brits, the Irish, the Scottish. Their new year was the 1st of November. So they celebrated the new year in their calendar on the 1st of November. That then meant that the 1st of November is a new beginning. Do you remember, when we have the 1st of January as our new year, we make New Year's resolutions. It's a new beginning. This year I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to do this. I wasn't looking at you specifically. But,
no, those sound about right.
Yeah, I was thinking about me as well. And so what you get is the 1st of November being their new year and new beginnings starting afresh, which means the day before is when everything dies. So they associated death with the day before the rebirth, the new beginning, which then happens to be the 31st of October. So they believe that spirits would come and ruin their crops. They believe they could get attacked by spirits. So the best thing to ward off the spirits would be to light bonfires, dress up in scary clothing to scare the spirits away, have jack-o'-lanterns, which they carved out of turnips or potatoes and put little lights in them. So anything they could do to scare off spirits. And of course, you would make a sacrifice. So the bonfires as well were part of sacrifices, animals, for example. And so this idea of trick or treat is that, you give a sacrifice to stop getting the trick. You give something so you then don't get punished, if you like. Wow. So the idea of trick or treat comes from that. Now, move on about 1,500 years. In about 700 AD, Pope Gregory III thought to himself, we don't have enough people going to church. So what we need to do is to create a Halloween. We need to create a day called All Saints' Day. So their 1st of November, the Christian church wanted to bring pagans into the church. He wrote a letter to the Bishop of London and said, we need to get more pagans into church. We need to bolster the church numbers. What can we do? And they decided to do a day on the 1st of November called All Souls or All Saints' Day, where you celebrated the saints. So All Hallows Day, in effect, all holy. So the night before then became All Hallows Eve, which then morphed into Halloween. So it started out being pagan. The Christian church then introduced the idea of a Saints' Day on the 1st, which then retrospectively the day before became All Hallows Eve and then morphed into Halloween. So that's kind of how things started.
And we still sit around bonfires or bone fires, if you will.
You're burning bones now, aren't you?
Yeah. That's crazy, though. It's like the whole history of Halloween right there. I didn't even mean to get that out of it. Yeah. But when they say that, is that a real thing? Is there more negative energy around in the air right now?
I wouldn't say negative energy. I'd just say energy in general. The fact that we're here now having a conversation about it, everyone's thinking about it, everyone's putting up decorations, is putting an energy for that to happen.
Yep.
So almost by default, you're creating an atmosphere where people are now seeing things. If I said to you, this week is when you're going to see the most amount of things, I bet this week you see more things than you would do normally. Because you're looking for it. That's right. You're putting the intention out there. And you're starting to look for that. I will add that ghosts and spirits really like wet, damp environments because energy loves wet, damp environments. Electricity jumps, doesn't it, in wet environments? So in the summer, when it's dry and arid, you do not get that much paranormal activity. At this time of the year, I mean, I've just experienced wet, damp, dry, very, very cold atmospheres. Spirits prefer that if they're energy. So it also rests upon the fact that seasonally and climatically, this is the best time for them to appear, just to how the weather is right now as well. So everything kind of comes together in one place.
Well, and now I've also heard that for Halloween, costume dressing up, and not only scaring spirits away, but also fitting in with spirits. Maybe some people are. That's what some people say, I think, as well. Like they dress up to like be a spirit.
Yeah,
you can take. It is possible to create a haunted environment. The Nepalese believe in a thing called a thought form, which they call a tulpa, which means if you think a place is haunted, it becomes haunted. So we're in the Bark Centre. They do a haunted house experience. Well, you're making the building more haunted because you're creating energy. Everyone goes there with the expectation that the building's haunted. So by default, it then becomes haunted.
We'll have to ask Greg if he has ever saged this place after the haunted house.
This is a big place to sage. You're going to need a big crew.
I was going to say he's going to need a semi full of sages going to roll up. Is what's going to be. You'll see smoke coming out of every window.
They'll think the building's on fire if this place is saged.
They're sweating them out of the library today.
You wouldn't say there's evil in the air though, because I've heard that a lot. That around Halloween, a lot of people think this is like an evil time, or celebrating Halloween's an evil thing. You hear that from a lot of Christian. I've even heard of people that are unable to celebrate Halloween because their parents won't let them because it's demonic or satanic.
Well, it's ironic when it started out being a Christian festival. Ultimately,
lack of knowledge of history could be.
Yeah, lack of knowledge of history. People just associate ghosts with evil. When ghosts are ultimately me and you, but dead. There's nothing evil about that. There's various places. If you think about it, Jesus conjured up the ghosts of Moses and Elijah, and you wouldn't say that Jesus was evil. Do you see what I mean? Or that Moses or Elijah were evil, because they were prophets. So people make a connection between ghosts and being evil, when evil is biblical. Evil's demonic. Evil is non-human. Ghosts and spirits. Of course, you can get angry, miserable, mean ghosts in the same way that you get mean, miserable, people when they're alive, and I'm sure Wyndham has one or two of those knocking around.
One or two,
he said ironically. And so, people make the wrong connections and aren't fully aware of their history. But then again, you're dealing with people that haven't read the book properly, for example. People would quote me the Bible, but they're getting it wrong. I mean, who's actually sat down and read it from front to back properly? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's not a ton of people that have read the whole thing. It's a long book.
So it gets and difficult to read, of course. So it gets mistranslated. People think they know what's in it. In actuality, that they don't, and they're getting it wrong ultimately.
You have to get the King James version. With the red writing.
There's so many different versions.
That's even worse.
The
King James version was mistranslated on purpose because King James was very unhappy with witches because his wife nearly drowned. I think she'd come from Denmark, and there was a shipwreck, and she nearly drowned. And he found out there was some witches in Denmark that put a curse on the ship, and he mistranslated the Bible on purpose to then prosecute witches and do all the witch murders, which then took place. So that's probably the worst text,
the worst advice. Version. But it is in red writing if you want to hear what Jesus.
Is that the one that has the red writing?
I think so.
Okay, so that's a little bit easier for everybody.
Ethan, you want to jump in here on what the fake?
No, I was gonna actually ask Adrian. Had one more video. I wanted to show Adrian the Iowa. I don't know if you heard about this, Adrian. This is an interesting thing. Iowa.
We brought this up.
We didn't bring it up because we never got to it. An Iowa family's basement flooded with blood. Have you heard?
What do they expect living in Iowa? Honestly, I mean, what do they think was going to happen?
Play the video, Colin. I just want Adrian to see this and talk. I have a question about it.
Nobody wants to see that, smell that. I wouldn't want that for anybody to have that in their house.
Backley resident Nick Listina and his family of 7 were getting ready to put their house on the market.
And they've told us, concurrently that shouldn't stay in the house because of the biohazard.
Until their basement was flooded with animal blood.
I was shocked at first, but I had a pretty good idea where it came from.
They've lived next to Doll's Meat Locker for 10 years, but have never had any problems. Listina says his neighbors were dumping hog and cattle remains down a floor drain, which is connected to his pipes and ended up in his basement. He immediately reported it to the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, which confirmed it as animal blood, fat, and bones, and then got the Department of Health involved due to its health hazards.
This was a very unique situation. I hope this does not happen again in the future.
The DNR says the meat locker has been cooperative in the investigation, but Lesina says his neighbors have been anything but that.
They haven't reached out at all. In fact, they've basically, they haven't taken any accountability for it. They just say it's not their fault, and I guess told me good luck, best of luck. It's if I want to do anything with it, it's on my dime and my schedule.
So he kind of got screwed over in the end. But my question was, all of this blood and bone and nasty stuff, does that conjure up something in an animal form or some kind of form?
I'm not sure all the bits and pieces would. The fact that he's next door to a slaughterhouse would. And by the way, they back onto a lake. So where's all that stuff going? That lake.
I was going to say,
there's a lake behind him there.
They better test their drinking water, too.
We thought cottonwood was bad.
The kids swimming in there.
I wonder if in the middle of the night, he's sitting there and suddenly he hears footsteps coming across the bedroom and he bolts upright and suddenly you hear...
Is that a thing? Animal spirits?
Oh, yeah,
you
can be haunted by all kinds of animals. Yeah, I've seen...
you showed us...
You brought a dog.
I did. There was a dog.
Yeah,
cats, dogs... I'm sure there's some sort of possessed guinea pig that's following me around at the moment. But I wouldn't suggest the blood and the bones...
Cemetery.
Yeah, you're
Pet
absolutely
Cemetery.
right. I wouldn't suggest the bones and the blood would cause issue paranormally, but being next to a slaughterhouse would. I mean, I've been to the soap factory in Minneapolis where they rendered down the carcasses of cats and dogs to make lye for soap, and that's very paranormally thick. I think any slaughterhouse, there's a rendering plant in town, of course.
Yeah.
And so I do think that in itself, where there's mass killing, that's their Auschwitz in effect, isn't it? Do you see what I mean? And they are living creatures. They are sentient, and that would leave a residual footprint behind. I could easily see that happening. I can't believe they've washed their hands of that. I think I know a few good lawyers, and I'm sure they'd be on that and getting him a few dollars there. That's ridiculous that he has to live with that.
That is ridiculous. I saw this. This just happened. Damon, you were asking if it's recent. This was about a couple weeks ago that this happened. And
they're trying to sell their house too. I don't think anybody's going to buy it. It's all over the news.
You'd think that'd be a biohazard or something. They have to completely strip the basement.
Well, Mike Adrian said they're next to a slaughterhouse. That's kind of a red mark against selling your house. I would think too.
I can't imagine people want to move.
Unless you're a butcher, then
that's classic Iowa.
You better get top dollar for that.
Would you not want to go home and get away from your work though? You don't want to take your work home with you. When I was a teacher, I didn't want to take my marking home with me. If you're a butcher, are you going to be sat there surrounded by pork chops? That's right. Yeah.
Leave your cleaver at the door.
Wow. Well, we could get into what the fake because we got a good one this week. We have 3 recent Halloween-related. Don't do answer, obviously. 3 recent Halloween-related news articles. One of the headlines is fake. We're going to try to figure it out. Adrian, I don't know if you've done this before.
I haven't, but I'm willing to play.
Okay, so we got 3 headlines. One of them is fake. First one, Bed Bath & Beyond stops selling black jack-o'-lanterns after blackface comparisons. So that is the first one. Second one, Australian department store pulls Donald Trump costume from stock after outrage. And the third one, Pennsylvania haunted house dares patrons to go naked, a Halloween first.
So what are we looking to do here? Pick the one that's false?
One that is false. 2 of them are real news articles. Well, one that is fake. We can kind of go through them one by one if you want to go back to the first one.
We can certainly do that.
So Bed Bath & Beyond stopped selling black jack-o'-lanterns after blackface comparisons. I know the answer, so I'm going to let you guys talk about them, figure it out.
I would think, I know there's a lot in the press at the moment, and...
I wouldn't be surprised if that's real.
Well, I'm working on the other 2 as well at the moment. I can believe that could happen based in the environment I find myself living in at the moment. In Britain, we've kind of gone through this and out the other side a little bit, but I could imagine people would find that offensive. We began this show with mentioning the amount of hate mail I get and the problems I have on a regular basis. And
True, yeah.
I can certainly imagine... and I have sympathy. I would agree. Blackface is ridiculous based on the history of slavery and the music hall and vaudeville acts that did that back in the day. It is 100% correct. It should be removed and not part of society. So I'm not saying that's not something that should happen, but applying that to a jack-o'-lantern seems a bit of a step too far, to be honest.
Second one?
I mean, at the end of the day, the jack-o'-lantern's orange, so perhaps Donald Trump needs to be sitting in there and saying
there we go. Well, speaking of Donald Trump, we got a Donald Trump one here. Australian department store pulls Donald Trump costume from stock after outrage.
That's probably true.
You must remember that I do a paranormal news show, and I think I
you
may
might have heard of
read.
these.
Did he not have somewhere in the world, and you're testing my memory this week, there was a Donald Trump image where he was holding a severed head of Barack Obama. So I'm thinking that could
I can't help you on any of these.
No, I'm thinking...
No I can't help you.
That one's probably
I'm thinking that could be true. If I get this wrong, by the way, I'm going to look like the worst psychic that's ever lived.
I
think Damon's
striking out here lately.
Damon's been striking out.
But I'm going to steer clear of the first two. I'm just going to say the third one, which we're looking at.
Pennsylvania haunted house dares patrons to go naked.
Well, I also think I've read stories...
A Halloween first.
And I feel that's...
that as well. I mean, you're feeling very vulnerable when you're naked.
I feel that's just what Ethan wanted to do here at the Bark, and he made that one up.
Can you not sign a piece of paper to say whether you want to be touched or not? Is that the case? If I had to commit, I'd say the first one was probably wrong. It's probably where I would commit to, so I don't know what the guys are thinking.
Adrian's going first one. Damon?
I'm saying 3. I'm steering clear of the first 2.
Okay, Colin?
I'll probably go on 1.
Oh, I thought you should pick 2, so we had it covered.
Okay, go to the answer, please. You got to go back. And the big answer. Here it is.
It's exciting times, isn't it?
Australian department store pulls Donald Trump costume after stock. It was not the Donald Trump costume they pulled. It was the child bride costume they pulled.
Oh, jeez.
That was an outrage, apparently, for a young girl to be a bride. So that
takes a lot to upset an Australian, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say they're very nice people. So
did anyone run through a haunted house naked then in Pennsylvania?
That's true. You can go through the haunted house naked.
I have seen that. Yeah,
and
I'll stay away from that one.
And Bed Bath & Beyond did pull their black jack-o'-lanterns because apparently, which to me seems like a step too far, because I feel like I've seen black jack-o'-lanterns at other stores than Bed Bath & Beyond, and I don't remember anyone having an issue with it. So I don't know. That's the what the fake of the week.
That must be the Beyond part of the Bed Bath. What is it?
Bed Bath and Beyond the Veil is what they should be called.
So that is the what the fake of the week. Nice. Very interesting stuff. Adrian, one more thing on here. Colin, if you go back to links, I looked up Halloween news, and you popped up in one of the main articles.
Did I really? Oh my.
Yeah. Colin, go to links. Yeah. Go to links. It's actually a pretty good article. You probably remember it. Well, I hope you remember it because you're in the pictures.
My.
Colin, copy that, paste that into the browser. Adrian popping up all over the news lately here. It seems like
this is recent. I always ask the dates.
I'm pretty sure this was recent. Yeah, because when I just searched Halloween news today, and this popped up. So, October 26, 2019. The Duluth newspaper, or what is this? The Duluth I can't even read what that is.
That's actually in Superior. That may be the Duluth newspaper, but that is the office and kitchen area of the Fairlawn Mansion. And I know that was a couple of years ago now because I've got more hair in that picture.
Well, this article came out yesterday about you.
Yeah, I didn't know that. But that investigation took place about 3 years ago. And I will tell you it took place 3 years ago because this book was published 3 years ago. And that investigation is in this book. So
Mysterious Minnesota.
Right there it says it.
Yep.
There we go. Let me have a look. Yes, Superior. That's page 2.
Look at they have a picture, Adrian.
237.
Oh, yeah, they put your book on there, Adrian.
Wow. And that book's been rewritten and expanded. And
wow. They don't have to get your permission or anything to write articles about you?
You can write about anything, to be honest. They wrote the article about 3 years ago, and they've just regurgitated it.
Oh, really?
Is what they've done. But, yeah, the investigation, in fact, there we go. I can show the good people watching. The Fairlawn Mansion is actually in this book, and that book was published 2 to 3 years ago.
Wow.
So the investigation you see me doing there is actually the one that's in this book. That's what I'm writing about, and I might be able to show you a couple of pictures. There's the Fairlawn Mansion and the photographs. So I can prove that we did that several years ago because that's the chapter.
If you see a spike in cells, here you go. If you start sending them north.
I'm certainly not complaining. And I do remember they did actually do that article at the time several years ago. And it was a very haunted building. If you get a chance to go up to Fairlawn, that's an amazing haunted building up there. I would recommend that.
Because I was actually trying to find news articles for this, and so I typed in Halloween news, and that was like one of the top ones that popped up.
Sure.
So I was like, wow, Adrian, we're getting him on tonight, and now I get an article with Adrian in it.
Well, it's interesting that about 10 or 12 years ago, I did a piece for Eyewitness News. Do you remember that? And I was at the Mounds Theatre in St. Paul.
Oh.
And what tends to happen is they regurgitate all of this stuff for Halloween.
Yeah.
So I'll be sat at home and I'll get a text message or a Facebook message saying, I just saw you on the television. and I'll be like, what was I on? And they said, it was Eyewitness News. And I said, that was 12 years ago.
Wow.
So a lot of this stuff tends to be regurgitated every Halloween. And I don't mind that, of course, because I'm selling books and it keeps my name out there and my product.
As long as you're not on America's Most Wanted.
Well, you say that, but...
or Dancing on Ice.
Adrian Lee. Yeah, or Dancing on Ice. There we go. Yeah. Wow, well, here's a good part for you, Adrian, while you're talking about books, to plug the new book and some of the other stuff you're working on. I know you're going all over the place doing talks.
Sure.
Well, thank you, Damon.
Yeah.
So here you go. Plug what's going on.
Well, I have a lot of... come and find me, first of all, on Facebook. More Questions Than Answers with Adrian Lee. All of my events, all of the places that I go. I'm going to be at GalaxyCon in Minneapolis the second weekend of November if people want to come along and say hello in the big conference. William Shatner's going to be there, actually. I'll see if I can shake his hand and say hello. But yes, the Ghosts and UFOs, connecting paranormal phenomena through quantum physics. We've touched upon one or two things there. It's a huge book full of interesting things. And the YouTube video for that, if you search for that, is available where I did my talk, and that was televised. So that's the latest one. If you're interested in ghost stories, I actually have the Barks Centre and Wyndham as chapters in this book. So perhaps I need to go on Facebook and advertise that in the next few days. In fact, that's in the Mysterious Midwest book, and you've done the Loon Lake Witch and had the same sort of hate mail I got, I believe. So that's in the Mysterious Midwest. Mysterious Minnesota is all of the sites in Minnesota. You can find all these on Amazon if you search for those. And we touched upon one or two things there. How to Be a Christian Psychic.
That your most popular book, correct?
That's correct, yeah. Probably because it's the least narrow. If you're interested in this book, you're normally interested in ghosts, history, and Minnesota, and that's quite a narrow little Venn diagram. This book tends to sell universally. You can be anywhere in the world, and that book would be of importance to you. Few people in Serbia, the Philippines, Iceland, or Brazil would be too interested in the ghosts and history of Minnesota, I would suggest. So it's a bit more of a narrow book, but you're absolutely 100% correct. The Christian Psychic book is the one that sells the best, but they're all available to you. They've got great reviews. Mysterious Midwest with the Loon Lake Witch, for example, and the chapter on Wyndham, you know, that has over 50, 60 5-star reviews. Every single review of that book on Amazon is 5 stars. And we said at the beginning, you can't please all of the people all of the time, but this book seems to be...
And if you try, you'll please no one.
Yeah.
That's 100% true. You just need to be the best that you can. Again, if people wish to listen to my radio shows, Friday night at 10 p.m. Central Time on the Dark Matter Digital Network, or you can go onto SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, search for MQTA Radio. We have lots of guests, lots of fun. We've won awards, comedy awards and various things for that, so that's very popular as well.
Fun show, entertaining show.
Yeah.
I've been told I'm very funny. Obviously, no one here thinks that, but I have been told that.
No, we love having you on, Adrian.
Adrian, may I ask who did the cover art of the Alien book?
I was going to say, who does that for you?
Kind of glancing at it over here.
Yeah, that's a fun little book we've put together there. Yeah, there's a lot of information, and it sounds like it's very heavy. We talk about quantum physics and collective consciousness. Honestly, I've explained that. I was a school teacher for 15 years. You can access this book. It's not complicated. You're not going to get lost. It's got loads of ghost stories, loads of UFO stories, all the things.
What's the art from on the cover? Is that a picture?
I designed that.
You designed that?
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, my original background was in fine art and graphic design, and I wanted to do a woodcut, like a medieval woodcut. It's not. I did it like a woodcut. But yeah, I designed. The thing is that my publisher says to me, "We can design your book jackets for you." And because I've got a degree in graphic design, wouldn't you want to do your own?
Yeah.
And they're happy because it's one less job they have to do, right?
Yeah.
So I do, in fact, I take all the photographs. It's obviously I've done all the writing, and I design the book jackets. If anyone doesn't like it, then it's solely on my shoulders, ultimately. I've no one else to blame but myself if nobody likes that. But yeah, I did that on the...
But you do have the light orb on the back, I saw, right? You
there you go.
You got to tie those together. So there's
and there's the burn marks for the guy that walked up to the UFO, and it burnt him in the chest because it vented out as he stood next to it.
And we've looked at that picture, the top one there of Adrian with the scratches on the top. We've pulled that one up for the podcast before.
That was in Jackson County. That took place in Jackson, that incident.
Yep.
So it's all in there. It's just a massive UFO and ghost stories from the local area. and then all coming together, you know, bringing them together as one, I guess.
So go check those out on Amazon, and also check out Adrian's show, More Questions Than Answers. Like you said, it's on every podcast directory and SoundCloud. Really appreciate you taking time to come out, Adrian. We know how busy you are, traveling all over the United States and all over the Midwest, doing your talks and everything, especially with the new book release. I know you got to be busy, so we really appreciate you coming.
That's fantastic.
It's been the big Halloween episode. It's been a fun time. Yeah. We're gonna get into November now. Next week we're gonna have
talk turkey.
Turkey. We're gonna have my uncle on next week, Mike Nelson.
I'm not calling your uncle a turkey. Yeah. I just want to make that clear.
Mike Nelson of Mountain Lake, the mayor. So he's gonna come on, talk to us about collecting old stuff. He's got a bunch of old signs and stuff like that.
Very interested.
Yeah.
In that,
so and he's also the mayor, so we can talk about running a small town. I'm sure that's interesting stuff for people around here. So thank you very much, Adrian, again for coming on.
Perfect. Thank you for inviting me.
Good luck with all your future endeavors, and we're always excited to see what stuff you come out with, because it's always really cool and interesting, and we'll have to get you back on again in the future. So to everyone watching, this is the Clerc podcast show. We will be back next week, and have a happy Halloween.